I was standing on the chair, sliding the curtain rod through the hook, when the broom handle struck my temple. Then came the cold words, "You're not needed here." 3 hours later, an old envelope revealed a truth. Their house did not belong to them. A 62-year-old mother, seemingly left with nothing, suddenly held the entire chessboard. And this time, I make the first move. My name is Grace Holloway. I am 62 years old, and on a cold Tuesday morning in Minneapolis, my daughter-in-law hit me with a broom. The light in their Linden Hills townhouse was thin, that flat, unforgiving light of early autumn that slices through kitchen windows and finds every speck of dust. It was an open-plan kitchen, all white quartz and stainless steel. Bleeding into a living room I was currently trying to warm up. My son, Daniel, was already at the quartz island, lost to the world. His laptop was open, and his noise-cancelling headphones were clamped on, a black wall around his head. He was scrolling, his face illuminated by the bluish glow, completely insulated. Across from him, Tessa, my daughter-in-law, leaned against the counter, holding a steaming mug. She was immaculate, even at 8 a.m., dressed in expensive-looking loungewear, her hair in a sleek knot. I was balanced precariously on one of their high-backed dining chairs, trying to thread the last loop of a new curtain onto the metal rod. I had bought them last week. A soft, eggshell white. That colour will just darken the room. "Grace?" Tessa said. Her voice was light, but it had a wire-thin edge of derision. I didn't turn. I focused on the rod. I thought it would make it cozier. Dear, the last ones were so thin. "We like thin. It's minimalist." I bit my lip and pushed the final loop on. I was just reaching up to settle the rod onto the high brackets when I saw the motion out of the corner of my eye. Tessa had been sweeping, and she lifted the broom. It was not a gentle tap. The hard, wooden handle of the broom cracked against my right temple. The sound was sharp, a dull thwack that seemed to echo inside my skull. A flash of white light exploded behind my eyes, followed by a sudden, sickening wave of nausea. My hand flew to my head, and I lost my balance. The curtain rod I was holding slipped from my other hand. It fell with a terrible clatter. The heavy metal bar hit the wide plank flooring, followed by the sound of the curtains puddling and the high-pitched skitter-skitter click of the tiny bracket screws scattering across the tile. I heard Daniel's music stop. He had pulled one side of his headphones off, his head turned halfway. His eyes were wide, taking in the scenery, clutching my head on the chair. Tessa, standing perfectly still with the broom in her hand, the chaos of curtains and metal on the floor. He looked at me. He looked at his wife. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the deep-seated hesitation. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Then, very slowly, he slid the headphone back over his ear. The muffled beat of his music returned, slightly louder this time. He turned back to his laptop. The world tilted. My left arm, the one I had braced myself with, was completely numb, as if it had been plunged into ice. The pain in my temple was now a hot, throbbing pulse. I slid off the chair, my knees hitting the floor hard. I was 62, and I was on my hands and knees in my son's kitchen. I focused on the screws. I had to pick up the screws. I found one near the leg of the island. My fingers fumbled, thick and stupid with the shock. I picked up another. I would not cry. I would not give her the satisfaction. Tessa sighed, a sound of pure impatience. "Honestly," she said, I looked up at her. She was looking down at me, her expression not angry, not sorry, just bored, annoyed, as if I were a spill she would have to clean up. She nudged the pile of fallen curtains with her foot. "You're not needed here." Her voice was not raised. It was a statement of fact, as cold and clean as the quartz counter. My breath hitched. The humiliation was a physical thing, hot bile rising in my throat. I lowered my head and picked up the last screw. As I pushed myself up, my hand brushed the new, white curtain fabric. When I pulled it away, I saw a small, bright smear of red on the eggshell cloth. It was just a speck of my own blood. But in the cold morning light, it looked like a stain that could never be washed out, a drop of ink that had just frozen the entire house. I walked past her, past my son, who was typing furiously, and went to the small bathroom down the hall. I did not slam the door. I looked in the mirror at the rising, angry purple welt on my temple. Today, I do not fight back. I whispered to the woman in the mirror, the one who looked so old and so very tired. But I will remember. In the small bathroom, I held a washcloth soaked in cold water against my temple. The swelling was already starting, the skin pulling tight and shiny over the bone. The cheap concealer I'd bought at the drugstore, a pale, chalky beige, wouldn't cover this. It wasn't just a bump, it was an accusation. It had only been 8 months since Evan died. 1 minute he was complaining about the Minnesota snow, the next, he was on the kitchen floor, a massive stroke, gone. Our house in St. Paul, the one we'd lived in for 34 years, suddenly felt cavernous. Every room echoed with his absence. The stairs were too steep, the yard too big. Daniel had been so kind then. At first, "Mum, it's too much for you," he'd said, his hand over mine at the funeral home. "Sell the house. Come stay with us. Tessa and I, we want to take care of you. It's what Dad would want. For convenience, for care." I'd clung to those words. I sold the house, the repository of my entire adult life, and moved into their sleek, modern townhouse with 2 suitcases and Evan's ashes in an urn. My room was the den. It was, perhaps, 10 feet by 8. It faced the concrete wall of the parking garage, and the single window was painted shut, the sash warped by moisture. The bed was a pull-out sofa, the mattress so thin and compressed in the middle that I rolled inward every night. My suitcases were stacked in the corner, serving as a dresser. Tessa needed the closet for her influencer merchandise. My purpose in this house was clear. It was laminated and stuck to the stainless steel refrigerator with a minimalist magnet. The schedule: Monday, grocery shopping and meal prep; Tuesday, laundry, and Tessa's delicate separate, cold wash, hang dry only; Wednesday, deep clean kitchen; Thursday, laundry, towels and sheets; Friday, walk Bentley, their hypoallergenic golden doodle, and vacuum. It just helps the house run smoothly. Grace. Tessa had chirped when she posted it. I did it all. I woke up before them, made the coffee. I tidied. I walked the dog 3 days a week. I took the bus to Harborlight Social Services, my part-time job sorting donations. It wasn't about the money. It was about having a place to go where people said thank you, and my existence wasn't an inconvenience. It was where I could just be Grace, the woman sorting sweaters, not Grace, the burden. But I always failed, somehow. Grace, the coffee is weak again. I'm sorry, Tessa. I'll use an extra scoop. You folded the bath towels wrong. It's fold in 3, then in half, not half and half. It ruins the fibers. I'm sorry. I forgot. I was always apologizing. I'd tried to talk to Daniel last week after Tessa criticized the way I loaded the dishwasher. I waited for him by the garage door. Daniel, honey, can we talk about Tessa? She seems very stressed. He wouldn't look at me. He kept his eyes on his phone, already pulling his keys out. Now's not a good time. Mum, she's just particular. We can talk about it later. Later never came. He would disappear into his headphones, into his work, into the protective bubble he and Tessa had built, leaving me on the outside. I gently dabbed the cheap powder onto the swelling. It caked into the broken skin. I'd have to stop at the pharmacy after my shift at Harbourlight to buy my own bandages. I couldn't ask them. It would be an admission. It would be drama. The small humiliations were escalating. Last week, Tessa installed a new smart lock on the pantry. For food budget tracking, she'd said. But the code I was given didn't work. Yesterday, the main kitchen door had a new deadbolt. For safety standards, she'd announced. We're in the city, you know. My key fob, the one that got me into the building, had stopped working this morning. Oh, weird, Tessa had said when I had to buzz her from the call box. I must have forgotten to activate yours when I updated the system. I stared at the woman in the mirror, at the ugly purple mark blooming on her skin. The physical pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the slow, agonizing ache of being erased. The bruise would fade. Invisibility, I was learning, was a much deeper wound. It hurt more than the blow from any broom. The bruise on my temple had faded from angry purple to a sickly, mottled yellow-green. But the throb remained. The incident with the broom was 2 days ago. The escalations were now coming faster. I had tried to go to the pharmacy to buy proper bandages, but the car was no longer an option. Tessa, dear, I'd said, putting on my coat. I need to run to the store. Can I grab the keys? She was scrolling through her phone at the kitchen island. Oh, you can't take the car, Grace. I just redid our insurance. It only covers the primary owners on the title. Liability, you know. I see. I had been on that insurance for 8 months. I took the bus. At the pharmacy. I picked up the bandages and a small bottle of aspirin. At the checkout. The cashier ran my supplementary bank card, the one Daniel had set up for me when I sold my house. It's declined, she said, looking embarrassed for me. That can't be right. Could you try it again? She did. Declined. Insufficient funds. My face burned. I paid for the bandages with the $43 in cash I kept in my purse from my sorting job at Harbourlight. I waited until Daniel was home and alone, on his way to the garage. Daniel? My card was declined today. He froze, his hand on the doorknob, his back to me. He winced. Ah, yeah. Sorry. Mum, Tessa is restructuring our accounts, moving things around for tax efficiency. It's complicated. I'll get it sorted out. When? I asked, my voice small. I'll handle it, he said, and closed the door. He never mentioned it again. I was now 62, without access to a car or a bank account. The next violation was against Evan. I kept a small, polished wooden box on the shelf in my tiny room. It held his retirement watch, his favourite fountain pen, and a faded photograph of the two of us at Lake Superior, 20 years ago, squinting in the sun. Tessa came in, holding a steaming mug. Grace, she said, her eyes landing on the box. You know, that's a sweet box, but it's very heavy, the energy of it. Have you considered selling that stuff? It's a fantastic minimalist move to clear out old attachments. She wanted me to sell my husband's last, tangible pieces. I felt a coldness in my chest so profound it almost stopped my breath. I'll think about it, I said, my voice tight. Later that night, when I was sure they were asleep, I took the box into the small bathroom, the only place with a locking door. I sat on the closed toilet lid and took everything out, just to hold the items, to reassure myself they were still mine. As I ran my hand along the worn velvet lining, my fingers caught on something taped to the underside. A thick, cream-coloured envelope. My name, Grace, was written on the front in Evan's unmistakable, strong, black ink. Below it, 4 words, when needed, open. My heart hammered. I slid the envelope into the waistband of my pants, beneath my sweater, and put the box back. The next day, the pressure in the house became unbearable. Tessa was hosting a rebranding brainstorming session for her social media channel. 3 of her friends arrived, all impossibly thin, dressed in shades of beige and carrying laptops. They took over the living room, moving furniture, holding up paint swatches, and filming everything on their phones. I tried to stay in my room, but Tessa found me. Grace, we're trying to film in the main space. Could you maybe just wait outside? The light is better for our content without people in the background. I was exiled to the small front porch, which faced the garage. I sat on the cold concrete step for 3 hours, listening to their laughter and the buzz of their creative energy, until the sun began to set and the cold seeped into my bones. That night, Daniel came to my room. He stood in the doorway, unable to look me in the eye, twisting the hem of his shirt. "Mum," he began. He cleared his throat. "Mum, Tessa and I, we've been talking. We're just trying to get settled. You know, get into our groove as a married couple. And we think it might be better if you found a short-term rental, just for a few weeks." My blood ran cold. "A rental? It's not permanent," he said quickly, the words rushing out. "Just to let us stabilize, give us some space." I looked at the son I had raised, the boy I had taught to be kind, now a man who couldn't even look at me while he was making me homeless. I felt nothing. The anger, the fear, the humiliation, it had all burned away. All that was left was ice. "Fine," I said. I packed my one large suitcase. I took the small bag with my toiletries. As I was zipping the bag, Daniel returned. Tessa was on a loud video call in the kitchen. He pressed a small roll of bills into my hand. "For the first few nights?" he whispered. He finally looked at me, and I saw a flicker of shame in his eyes. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. It was $200. I left at 1 o'clock in the morning. The air was thick with a damp, cold fog that swallowed the streetlights. I did not call a friend. The shame was too great. I used my phone to call a car, and I asked the driver to take me to the Starlight Inn, a cheap motel off the highway I'd passed on the bus. The neon sign sputtered, the S and T dark. The man behind the glass was indifferent. My room smelled of damp carpet and stale smoke. The fluorescent light in the bathroom buzzed. I sat on the edge of the bed, the polyester comforter stiff and cold. My head was throbbing. The dizziness from the Broom strike had returned, brought on by the stress. My hands were shaking. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope. When needed, open. I think it's needed. Evan. I whispered to the empty, flickering room. I tore the seal. My fingers were numb, clumsy. Inside, there was no long, emotional letter. There was a small, brass safe deposit key. There was a thick, stapled set of documents with the title, The Maple Ridge Living Trust. And on top, a single sheet of his letterhead. A short, handwritten note. I sat on the edge of the stiff motel bed, the buzzing fluorescent light overhead making my skin look grey. I unfolded the single sheet of paper. Evan's handwriting was as clear and steady as he had been in life. My dearest Grace, it began. If you are reading this, it means a boundary has been crossed. I hoped you would never need this envelope. I set things up this way not to deceive you, but to give you peace. I wanted you to be my wife, not my business manager. But I also knew the world, and I knew our son's flexibility. So, if you are reading this, your peace has been broken. Do not defend your self-control. You have all the tools. My hands were shaking, the dizziness from my temple worsening. I picked up the thicker, stapled document. The Maple Ridge Living Trust. I read the first page, then the second. My vision blurred. I sat down heavily on the musty bedspread. The trust, established by Evan 5 years ago, owned the townhouse. Not Daniel and Tessa. The trust. I read on, my heart pounding a hole in my chest. The trust also held a reserve bank account. And, my breath caught, it held a controlling interest, 51% of a company I'd barely heard of, Pioneer Hearth and Home, a building renovation and management company. Evan's letter explained. He had built Pioneer Hearth secretly, using his retirement savings, as a hedge against the future. He'd kept it quiet so I wouldn't have to worry about it. But you are the trustee, Grace. The letter continued. And the sole beneficiary. I scanned the legalese of the trust document. It was written in simple terms, just as Evan would have insisted. As trustee, I had the power to change tenants, the power to terminate the right of use agreement, which I now saw Daniel and Tessa were living under. I even had the power to intervene in the homeowners association management if I found a conflict of interest. And there it was, a secondary document, stapled to the back of the trust, a contract between the Linden Hills HOA and Pioneer Hearth and Home. My husband's company, now my company, held the exclusive maintenance contract for the entire community. A clause, circled in red ink by Evan's pen, noted that Pioneer H&H also held the right to recommend immediate replacement of the HOA management board in the event of fiscal irregularities. My husband, the quiet man who fixed gutters and loved history documentaries, had built me a fortress, and Tessa, in her arrogance, had just handed me the key. The $200 Daniel had given me was still crumpled in my pocket, damp with my sweat. It was 3 a.m. I didn't sleep. At 9 o'clock sharp, I used my phone to make a call. Not to Daniel, not to a hotel. I called a number I knew from my volunteer work at Harbourlight Social Services. Hello? I said, my voice hoarse. May I please speak to Avery Locke? I'm a volunteer. I need some pro bono advice. Avery Locke was a sharp, young lawyer who donated 2 days a month to Harbourlight. By 11. I was sitting in her small, cluttered office, the motel coffee bitter on my tongue, the documents spread between us. She read them in silence, her expression neutral. Grace, she said finally, looking up. This is ironclad. Evan did a phenomenal job. She made a call. Yes, checking the county registry, just as I thought. She hung up and turned to me. The deed for the Linden Hills townhouse is held exclusively by the Maple Ridge Living Trust. Your name is the only one on it as trustee, signed 8 months ago when you moved in. Daniel and Tessa. They are, legally, just guests living under a very specific and revocable family agreement. They have no ownership rights. None. What do I do? I asked. Avery's expression hardened. First, we secure you, she called in her paralegal. Ava, I need you to set up a new entity, North Star Hearth LLC, immediately. We need a layer of anonymity for Mrs. Holloway to operate through. Avery turned back to me. The trust contains a reserve account. How much is in it? I showed her the bank statement Evan had sealed in the envelope. Avery nodded. Good. More than enough. Enough for 6 months of living expenses and all the legal fees we'll need? She looked at me, her eyes dropping to the yellowing, terrible bruise on my temple. What happened to your head? Grace. I fell against a broom handle. Avery's gaze did not waver. Did you, or were you hit? I met her eyes. I was hit. Right. She picked up her phone again. Ava, before you file the LLC, schedule a CT scan for Mrs. Holloway at Hennepin County Medical, and get a full toxicology panel. We are building a legal fence. Today. I walked out of her office into the bright, cold sunlight. I was not the same woman who had walked in. I was not a burden. I was not an inconvenience. I was the trustee. The first thing I did was erase the woman from the motel. I left the Starlight Inn, took a cab to a salon, and sat in the chair. The long, greying hair that I always tied back the hair Tessa said looked untidy. I watched it fall to the floor. I had it cut short, silver and sharp, styled to flatter my face, not to be invisible. I threw away the cheap, wire-rimmed glasses I'd worn for 10 years and, using the new debit card from the trust reserve account, I bought a pair of dark, modern frames. I did not stop there. I went to a department store, the first time I'd shopped for myself since Evan died. I bypassed the beige cardigans and soft-soled shoes. I bought a stone-coloured wool suit, tailored and clean. I bought crisp blouses. I bought a pair of low, sturdy-heeled leather shoes built for walking, for standing firm on solid ground. I did not return to the townhouse. I did not return to the den that faced the parking garage. Using the trust funds, Avery found me a furnished, monthly serviced apartment in a secure building overlooking Bidamaka Scar. The kitchen was tiny, barely a closet compared to the quartz monolith in Linden Hills, but the afternoon sun streamed in, bright and warm, and it was mine. That night, I sat at a small desk by my new, clean window. I had bought a simple, leather-bound notebook. I opened it to the first page. At the top, in my new, steadier hand, I wrote, "Things I no longer accept." Avery and I met daily. We had the CT scan results from the hospital, a mild concussion, now documented. We had the medical report. Avery was ruthlessly efficient. First, she said, her office smelling of strong coffee. We secure you. She had already opened a new, private bank account solely in my name, linked only to the Maple Ridge Trust. We immediately severed any authorization, digital or physical, that Daniel had helped me set up. He could no longer see my pension. He could not touch my social security. He was blind. Second, we protect you. She continued. Based on the medical report from the hospital, the one detailing the impact trauma to my temple and my sworn affidavit about the Broom assault, we filed for a temporary protective order. The judge granted it immediately. Tessa and Daniel were forbidden from approaching me, contacting me, or coming within 100 yards of my new residence. I did this not just for my safety, but for strategy. The battle would not be fought in the kitchen, it would be fought on paper, and I would not be present for their hysterics. While I was rebuilding my appearance, Avery was deconstructing their lives. She drafted the notice to cease and vacate use, the legal document based on the trust's terms that would evict them. We didn't serve it. Not yet. It was a loaded weapon, waiting. Then, Avery, operating through my newly formed entity, North Star Hearth LLC, requested a quick audit of the Linden Hills HOA financials. The results came back in 48 hours. My townhouse. My property was 3 months behind on its HOA maintenance fees. At the same time, Avery activated my authority as the 51% controlling owner of Pioneer Hearth and Home. The company's operations manager, who had been frustrated by the Linden Hills HOA for months, sent Avery the complete service history. Avery laid the 2 reports side by side on her desk. Here it is. Grace. She tapped the first report. The HOA fees are unpaid. She tapped the second. And here is why. Tessa, using her influence, has been repeatedly waiving the scheduled community maintenance from Pioneer. She'd tell the board they didn't need it, saving the budget. Saving it for what? Avery slid a third document over the HOA expense ledger. She was saving the budget to pay herself. Here are 3 separate internal staging invoices submitted by Tessa Quinn Designs, charged to the general HOA fund. She was defunding the building's upkeep to pay herself for decorating her own living room for her social media channel. But there was one thing worse. While auditing the accounts Daniel had managed, Avery flagged a high-interest credit card I had never seen before. It was opened 3 months ago, in my name. The application had been approved using a digital copy of a power of attorney document. That is not my signature, I said, my voice cold. Avery sent the file to a forensic handwriting expert. The report was conclusive. This power of attorney is a forgery, Avery summarized. And it was submitted with the credit card application by Tessa. She has committed felony fraud. Avery organized the files on her desk into 3 neat piles. We had a 3-pronged plan. First, the housing, Avery said. We have the protective order and the pending eviction notice. Second, the HOA, she continued. We have the unpaid dues, the fraudulent invoices, and the proof Pioneer H&H needs to intervene. She tapped the third pile. And third, the criminal, the forged POA. I looked at the stone-coloured suit hanging in my new closet. I was no longer the woman in the den. We wait for 1 more day, I said. Let them wonder why the bank account is frozen. Avery and I did not serve the eviction notice. We served the audit, operating as North Star Hearth LLC. Avery sent a formal, non-negotiable demand to the Linden Hills HOA board, a full, independent financial audit to be initiated within 10 days, citing severe discrepancies in maintenance billing. Simultaneously, as the 51% owner of Pioneer Hearth and Home, I had our operations manager activate the emergency clause in their contract. A letter was dispatched to the board stating that due to gross fiscal mismanagement and potential misappropriation, Pioneer was officially recommending the immediate dissolution of the current management board and the appointment of a neutral third-party fiduciary. The hornet's nest had been kicked, while the HOA board was reeling from that. Avery, acting on my behalf as trustee of the Maple Ridge Living Trust, sent a separate notice directly to Daniel and Tessa. It wasn't an eviction. It was worse. It was a notice of privilege suspension, due to violation of community bylaws specifically. The non-payment of 3 months of mandatory fees, their access to all non-essential, high-end community amenities was immediately revoked. Their key fobs for the garage deactivated. Their access code for the private storage unit changed. Their reservations for the wine cellar and the rooftop terrace cancelled. They were still in the house, but they were now trapped by the luxury they had coveted. They would have to park their car on the street, in the cold. The dominoes fell faster than I could have imagined. The HOA board, now terrified of a lawsuit, began circulating the audit demand. The news that the HOA was under investigation for misappropriation spread through the wealthy community like fire. Tessa's entire brand was built on her image as the Linden Hills tastemaker. Her primary partner, a high-end furniture company, cut ties with her within 24 hours, citing the scandal. Her income, as Avery later confirmed, dropped to 0 overnight. The bank, having received the forged power of attorney and Avery's formal complaint, was next. They didn't just cancel the card Tessa had taken out in my name. They froze all of her personal accounts and flagged her entire portfolio for a major fraud investigation. My phone rang on a Thursday afternoon. I looked at the screen. Daniel? I let it ring until it went to voicemail. His message was a frantic, breathless string of words. Mom? What is going on? The car is on the street. The bank has frozen everything. Tessa's partner dropped her. What did you do? Call me back. You have to fix this. I looked out my new window over the calm, blue water of the lake. I picked up my phone and sent a single text message. All communication must be directed to my counsel, Avery Locke. The response to that was Tessa. That night, she went on a live video stream. She was tear-streaked, her face puffy, broadcasting from the quartz kitchen. She didn't name me. The protective order was too new, too risky. But she didn't have to. She spoke of a toxic, manipulative mother-in-law who had been welcomed into her home only to secretly plot to destroy her family. She cried about being financially terrorized by a bitter, lonely old woman who was jealous of her success. Thousands of people were watching. I watched it from my quiet apartment. I felt nothing but cold resolve. She just breached the protective order, I said to Avery on the phone. She did more than that, Avery replied, her voice grim. She just gave us our opening. The next morning, Tessa was served with a new set of papers at the townhouse. It was not a request. It was an emergency motion. A cease and desist from Avery, bundled with an exhibit. Exhibit are the high-resolution image from my CT scan, showing the trauma to my skull. Exhibit B, the medical report detailing the concussion. Exhibit C, my sworn affidavit detailing the assault with the broom. The court's response was swift and brutal. An emergency injunction was granted. Tessa was legally ordered to take down the video and all related content immediately. She was ordered to post a public retraction, drafted by Avery. And the judge reinforced the protective order if she so much as typed my initials in public again. She would be arrested for contempt. Her social media, her only remaining weapon, went dark. The final pieces fell into place 2 days later. The preliminary audit results came in, confirming everything. The auditors had found the creative invoices. They had traced the HOA funds, earmarked for building maintenance, being paid directly into Tessa Quinn Designs business account for staging her own home. The HOA board had no choice. An email was blasted to every resident. An emergency general meeting was called for the following week. The public, the neighbours, who had seen me as just the quiet mother-in-law, were suspicious. They smelled blood in the water. Avery looked at me. It's time. They're all in one room. I remained silent. I was just getting dressed for the meeting. 2 days before the emergency HOA meeting, Daniel broke. He didn't call me. He couldn't. The protective order was in place. He showed up at Avery Locke's office, unannounced. Avery called me afterward. He's a wreck, Grace, she said, her voice flat, professional. He sat in my client chair for 20 minutes, just staring at his hands. He looks like he hasn't slept in days. He had admitted everything, the words tumbling out of him in a desperate, disorganized confession. He admitted he knew Tessa was using my name on credit applications. He admitted he saw her hit me with the broom and did nothing. He admitted he'd let her control every financial decision, let her drive every social decision, because he was terrified. Terrified of her anger, terrified of her leaving him, terrified of not living up to the high-gloss life she demanded. His habit of avoiding conflict, of letting things slide, had metastasized into full-blown complicity. He just kept saying, I thought I could make her happy, and then it would all stop. Avery reported. I listened on the phone, watching the calm, grey water of the lake from my apartment window. I felt nothing. No pity. No surge of maternal instinct to comfort him. The place where that had lived was now a cold, smooth scar. He wants to talk to you, Avery said. No, I replied. You can give him my conditions. Avery relayed the message. I listened, but I did not comfort. I did not offer absolution. Through Avery, I gave him a path, not back to me, but back to basic decency. He was to start individual, intensive therapy immediately. He was to establish a separate financial identity from Tessa, with a court-approved credit counselor. He was to draft a plan to begin repaying the debt that had been fraudulently accrued in my name. He had asked Avery, Will she ever forgive me? Mrs. Holloway is not interested in your words, Avery had told him. She is not offering forgiveness. She is offering you a chance to redeem yourself. Redemption is based on action. That evening, I walked by the lake as the sun set, the sky a cold mix of purple and orange. I sat on a bench and opened the leather notebook, the one that held my list of things I no longer accept. I turned to a new page. I wrote, I am no longer asking for a place in my son's house. I am building my own. I was not just building my own house. I was building a new foundation. The next morning, I met with Avery and a financial planner. I signed the documents to endow a temporary support fund at Harbour Light Social Services, the Grace Holloway Fund, specifically designated for housing deposits for women over 50 facing sudden homelessness. It was a small act, but it felt like an anchor. It was a counterweight to the coldness I was now capable of. I was taking the power Evan had left me and using it not just to tear down, but to build up. This was not just revenge. It was a rebalancing. Avery had news for me. The police have officially filed the assault report, she said, signing the last document for the fund. with your medical records attached. It's now an open case, pending charges. The last legal fence was in place. Daniel tried to act. 2 days later, a check arrived at Avery's office. It was for $500, with medical expenses written in the memo line. A clumsy, frightened attempt to make it go away. Avery called him. "Mrs. Holloway is returning this," she said, her voice like ice. "She informs me that you cannot buy back the time she lost, and you cannot put a price on an assault." Tessa, meanwhile, was silent on social media, but she was not inactive. She had tried to bypass Avery, sending a message to an old email address of mine. It was a frantic, misspelled attempt at negotiation. "Grace, this is all a huge misunderstanding. We can sort this out. Call me. We can make a deal. Don't let these lawyers ruin everything." I deleted it without a reply. We were all at the edge of the cliff, poised in the silence. The legal letters had been sent. The confessions had been made. The desperate attempts at bribery and negotiation had failed. Now, there was only the final, public reckoning. We were all waiting for the final cut, and it was scheduled for 7 p.m. at the HOA meeting. The ground floor multipurpose room was packed. The air was hot and smelled of burnt coffee and anxiety. Residents of Linden Hills, people I had only seen in the elevator, were crammed into folding chairs, standing along the walls. This was the emergency general meeting. Tessa was at the front, standing at a lectern, inexplicably confident. She was dressed in a sharp, cream-coloured pantsuit, a picture of professional victimhood. She was in the middle of a PowerPoint presentation, filled with aesthetic vision boards for the lobby. And while we have been subjected to a vicious, anonymous campaign of sabotage, she was saying, her voice ringing with false sincerity, "I am confident that my vision for this community's brand is what will elevate all of our property values. We cannot let anonymous cowards derail our progress." A few people clapped, mesmerized by her confidence. The current HOA president, a nervous man in a golf shirt, looked relieved. Then, Avery Locke, in a severe charcoal suit, stepped forward from the side. "Excuse me, Mr. President?" Avery said, her voice cutting through the room. "My name is Avery Locke. I am the legal counsel for the entity that is, in fact, the largest single property holder in this community, and we have a few points of order." A murmur went through the room. Tessa's smile faltered. "Largest property holder?" the president asked, confused. "That unit is the Holloway unit?" "That is correct," Avery said. She placed a thick, bound document on the overhead projector. "The legal owner of Unit 4B and all its attached voting rights is the Maple Ridge Living Trust. I am the legal representative of the trustee." As Avery was speaking, I slipped in through the back doors. I wore my stone-coloured wool suit. I stood against the back wall, my hands clasped. Just another face in the crowd. A few residents, neighbours who also volunteered at Harbour Light, nodded at me. They recognised Grace, the nice lady who sorted donations. They looked confused, seeing me here. Now. They could not connect me to the power now being discussed. I was invisible, just as Tessa had always wanted me to be. "And as the representative of the trust," Avery continued, "I now yield the floor to Mr. Harris of Pioneer Hearth and Home, who has completed his contractually obligated review of your maintenance fund." A no-nonsense man I'd met only once, Mr. Harris, stepped up. He did not use a PowerPoint. He just read from a single, damning sheet of paper. Our review, requested by the trust, he began, found severe financial irregularities over the last 6 months, $35,000 in essential maintenance, scheduled by us, was waived by the board president at the behest of Mrs. Tessa Quinn. Gasps. Tessa went pale. We also found, Harris continued, a direct conflict of interest. The funds saved by waiving maintenance were redirected. We have found 3 invoices, totaling $28,000, paid from the general HOA fund to a private entity. Tessa Quinn Designs, for internal staging services that benefited only one unit, Mrs. Quinn's. This is an outrage, the president sputtered. These are lies. They are facts, Avery said, stepping back up. And now, we move to the first resolution, the immediate dismissal of the current board for gross mismanagement. You can't, the president shouted. You don't have the votes. Actually, Avery said, holding up a small sheaf of papers. We do. My other client, North Star Hearth LLC, spent the last 2 days acquiring the delinquent debt of 3 other units in this building that were in arrears. As of 9 a.m. this morning, North Star holds the proxy votes for those 3 units, in addition to the primary vote held by the Maple Ridge Trust. We have the controlling votes. She didn't even call for a count. All in favor of dismissal. Avery raised her hand. The hands of the 3 proxies she held went up. It was done. The motion passes, Avery said into the stunned silence. The board is dismissed. As per the community bylaws, Pioneer Hearth and Home's recommendation for a temporary fiduciary, Ms. Alice Gable, is now accepted. Ms. Gable, if you would. A woman I had never seen before, professional and stern, walked to the front. Thank you, she said. First order of business, a resolution to authorize legal clawback of all misappropriated funds to be fully repaid by the beneficiary. She looked directly at Tessa. That beneficiary being Tessa Quinn. The room exploded. But Ms. Gable wasn't finished. Second resolution, the use agreement for Unit 4B, currently occupied by Mr. Daniel Holloway and Mrs. Tessa Quinn, is under review by the legal owner, the trust. A new, strict, month-to-month agreement has been issued, clarifying their non-owner status. Any further violation of community bylaws, including non-payment of dues or public disturbances, will result in immediate termination of use. That was when Tessa lost control. The tastemaker was gone. You can't! She shrieked, lunging toward Avery. You old! She didn't finish. 2 security guards, hired by Avery and waiting in the hall, stepped in and flanked her, their hands up. Mrs. Quinn, you need to calm down, one said. The room was in chaos. People were yelling, demanding answers. Tessa was hyperventilating, pointing a shaking finger at Avery, then at me, as if just realizing I was there. Ms. Gable stepped back to the microphone. This meeting is temporarily paused. I turned, and, unnoticed in the pandemonium, I walked out the back door. The main meeting room was still in chaos. Avery had guided me, Daniel and Tessa, into a small, sterile conference room to the side. The security guard stood just outside the closed door. The 4 of us sat at a small laminate table under a flickering fluorescent light. Tessa was vibrating with rage, her knuckles white as she gripped her phone. Daniel just looked grey, his eyes hollow and fixed on the table. I took my briefcase, the one I had bought with my new suit, and placed it on the table. I clicked it open. I did not raise my voice. "I believe we have a few things to finalize," I said. I took out the first folder and slid it in front of them. My medical records from Hennepin County, detailing the concussion I sustained 2 weeks ago. I slid over the second file. The official police report, documenting the assault. I slid over a third. This is a high-resolution photograph of the bloodstain I left on the curtain you hit me with. I slid over the fourth and final pile. And these are the fraudulent HOA invoices you submitted. Tessa. The ones you used to embezzle $28,000. Tessa stared at the papers, her breath coming in short, angry hisses. "Here are the terms," I said, looking first at Daniel. "You will vacate the townhouse within 14 days. You will provide my lawyer with proof of enrollment in therapy and a signed agreement with a credit counselor. You will sign these papers." Avery placed a document in front of him, severing all financial ties, accounts, and responsibilities from Tessa. "You will do this, or I will add your name to the fraud and conspiracy charges." Then I turned to Tessa. Her eyes were full of pure hatred. "For you, Tessa, it's simpler," I said. "You will repay every cent you stole from the HOE, starting today. You will post the public apology exactly as my lawyer has written it, and you will never, ever contact me or come near me again. You agree to all of this, or tomorrow morning. Avery will file a criminal complaint for felony fraud regarding the forged power of attorney and a civil suit for the assault. Your choice." Tessa laughed. It was a high, thin, ugly sound. "You wouldn't dare. You wouldn't do that to your own son. You wouldn't ruin your own family." I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. The woman who had been hit with a broom was gone. "I am not threatening you, Tessa," I said, my voice quiet and clear. "I am informing you. I am simply telling you what will happen tomorrow at 9 a.m. The silence in the room was absolute. Then, Daniel, in a small, cracked voice, spoke. "Okay." Tessa's head snapped toward him. "What did you say?" "Okay," he said, louder. He picked up the pen Avery had set out. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. "I'll do it." He signed the financial separation document with a wet, ragged signature. For the first time in their relationship, I realized he had said no to her. He stood up, pulled the keys to the townhouse from his pocket, and slid them across the table to Avery. That is when Tessa broke. "No," she screamed, lunging across the table. She wasn't going for Daniel. She was going for the files, for the evidence. She never made it. The guard was through the door in a second, his hand on her arm. "Ma'am, you need to step back." "Get off me!" she shrieked, trying to rip her arm away, finally and completely unmasked. "And one last thing," Avery said, her voice cutting through Tessa's hysteria. She held up her phone, showing a crystal-clear image on the screen. It was a still from a neighbor's doorbell camera, time-stamped from 2 weeks ago. It showed the front window. It showed me, on the chair. And it showed Tessa, mid-swing. The broom handle a blur aimed at my head. Tessa stopped screaming. She just stared at the image, her mouth open. "A very helpful neighbor," Avery commented, putting the phone away. "And finally, Mrs. Quinn," Avery said, opening the Maple Ridge Trust document to a page marked with a yellow tab. Section 4B, paragraph 2. The trustee reserves the right to immediately and permanently terminate the right of use for any guest or tenant in the event of violent behavior conducted on the property. Avery looked up. Hitting your mother-in-law in the head with a broom, she said, is considered violent behavior. The arrogance didn't just crack, it shattered. The calculating, beautiful influencer was gone, replaced by a terrified, cornered animal. Tessa collapsed into her chair, her face white with fear. Daniel looked at me, his face a mask of shame. "Mom," he whispered, I'll follow the path you've laid out. I'll do it." I looked at my son, the man he had become, the man he might, one day, begin to be. I did not hug him. I just nodded. The court hearing was not a trial. It was a 12-minute confirmation of facts. The judge, a sharp woman who did not appreciate time wasting, reviewed the trust documents Evan had prepared. She affirmed my rights as the sole trustee. She approved the formal vacate order, giving Daniel and Tessa 48 hours to remove their personal belongings. She looked at the police report and the medical file from my concussion. She extended my protective order against Tessa for 1 full year. The process of reclamation was cold and efficient. Ms. Gable, the new HOA fiduciary, met a locksmith and the manager of Pioneer Hearth and Home at the townhouse at the exact deadline. They changed the locks. They began a full inventory of the property, separating the trust's assets from the items Daniel and Tessa had left behind, which were moved to a storage unit. The utilities were transferred back into the trust's name. Tessa, as I knew she would, had one last performance. She posted a final, tearful live stream, filmed in the public hallway outside the unit as the locksmith worked. She spoke vaguely of being framed and financially terrorized by hidden enemies who had destroyed her family. It was a desperate, chaotic ramble. It did not matter. The next day, as part of her legal agreement to avoid criminal fraud charges, her signed public retraction and apology was posted by Ms. Gable to the HOA Community Board. Her credibility and her career were finished. Daniel, on the other hand, was silent. He did not fight the order. He was gone before the deadline hit. Avery began receiving forwarded emails, his proof of action. A receipt for a deposit on a small studio apartment near a temp job he'd found. A signed enrollment form for a credit counseling service. A recurring weekly schedule for therapy. He was doing the work. I did not move back into the townhouse. Instead, I signed a contract. I met with a design team from Pioneer Hearth and Home and the executive director of Harbourlight Social Services. We were renovating. The entire lower floor of the townhouse, the space Tessa had used for her branding, was being redesigned. It was being converted into a fully independent, secure, short-term residency, specifically for the Women in Harbourlight's program for those over 50 who were facing housing crises. 1 week later, I returned to the house. It was empty, the air smelling of clean paint and wood dust. The living room, which had been the scene of my humiliation, was bare. I had a box with me. I took out a new set of curtains, a simple, warm, eggshell white. I unfolded the stepladder. I was on the second step, aligning the first hook, when I heard a soft knock on the open door. It was Daniel. He looked pale and thin, and he was standing on the doormat in the hallway. He did not cross the threshold. "Mom," he said. His voice was hoarse. He looked at the rod in my hands. I saw the painters. He swallowed, looking at the high bracket on the wall. Can I Can I install that last one for you? Please. It was a small, desperate request. A need to fix the one, tiny, physical thing that had started all of this. I looked at him, standing outside the frame of the house. I stepped down from the ladder. I didn't say anything. I just handed him the curtain rod. I watched him work. He was clumsy, his hands shaking slightly, but he did it. He slid the rod onto the brackets, making sure it was level. He stepped back. "It's done?" he said. "Thank you." "Daniel?" I said. He nodded, just once, and then he turned and walked away down the hall. I stepped forward. I finished hanging the last of the curtains, the soft fabric filtering the cold afternoon light. Then I walked to the new front door. I turned the gleaming, solid, new deadbolt. The click of the lock sliding into place was the loudest, most beautiful sound in the world. It was the sound of a new boundary. As I stood there, my hand on the lock, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a new email from Avery, a simple, automated notification. The first wire transfer from Tessa Quinn, paying back the initial installment to the HOA's recovered funds, had just been confirmed. The wheels were turning. I looked around the quiet, empty room, at the light coming through my new curtains. "This house is still needed," I said to the silence. "But it is needed for the women who were kicked out of their own lives. As for those who saw me as disposable, they are not needed here." Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from, so drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and if you want to help us out, hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.